and do not necessarily reflect the views of Urban One Incorporated, Radio One, or any of its subsidiary companies.
Attorney Nathaniel Lee, a lawyer with credibility, success, and experience, representing people in hundreds in the club. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cassell, and Keegley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Here are today's hosts.
Good morning, everyone. This is Nathaniel Lee. Thank you for listening to our show each week. And we thank our dedicated callers that call in and monitor our show. Thank you for my people in South Florida. I did receive your emails and texts. I thank you for watching our show and spreading the message down in South Florida. And also, of course, the people out of New York and Chicago, thank you very much. This week, we're in a government shutdown. There's a lot of things to talk about today that have significant legal consequence. But, we have our standing panel, Attorney Marlon Primes and Craig Research Analyst, Attorney Vanita Banks with us today. But I'm going to start off by talking about the impact of this government shutdown because, I have sleepless nights about this, and I'm really sad as to how this affects so many people in our community. And the federal government had a high number of African-American women employed before the arrival of Trump. And then that massive layoff led to a record number of unemployed Black females, a lot of which were header households. But this shutdown affects 2 to 3 million federal workers. And they say essential employees like at the TSA, air traffic controller, law enforcement, military must work without pay until the shutdown ends. Non-essential employees are furloughed, sent home without work or pay. Now, typically, the workers receive back pay once the government reopened. But I was wondering how in the heck these people pay their monthly mortgage, their loans, and their car payment, put food on the table, if their paycheck is cut off. Then the other thing is that the public service of the national parks may close. You're trying to get a passport, a visa is going to be delayed. I'm not sure you'll be able to get it. Small business loans are paused. The IRS customer service reduced, although the tax collection component, they say, continues, and the federal courts can operate briefly on reserve, then may limit operation. Now, what's not immediately impacted, of course, thank God, are your Social Security checks, Medicare and Medicaid payments continue. The military remain in operation, although I'm told that the troops don't necessarily get paid during shutdown. They say now the mail delivery continue. United States Postal Service is a self-funded, and also the essential services like the FBI, Border Patrol, and Federal Bureau of Prison keep opening. And so the severity of this on our economy, it always have a critical effect. But the one thing that I'm concerned about, people work hard to get their Social Security benefits, and when they start shutting down field offices, that means that new applicants won't be able to get their Social Security check, which is sad because I know how important that is. But there's a host of things going on today other than that, but that was on my mind. I know that a lot of you are worried about it because a lot of folks do engage in air travel, and the air travel, for the most part, seem like it's okay for the time being but they have a shortage of air traffic controllers, which I think is a danger. But having said that, we'll start off with our Justice Department because there's just so much calamity in the Justice Department. So I start off with Marlon. Well, there's so many things that are going on in the Justice Department. I don't know where to start.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Certainly, there's some trying times at the U.S. Department of Justice. And I think the thing that your listeners should recognize is that the Department of Justice has so much authority. They can indict an individual, and just charging someone with the crime could ruin a reputation, even if they're subsequently acquitted. So as a result of that, there have been a number of rules in place that try to separate those of the U.S. Department of Justice and U.S. Attorney's Office from politics. And, because part of the issue is that we want to make sure that the judgments of my former colleagues at the U.S. Department of Justice, that those are beyond reproach. And so when you have circumstances like we're seeing in the media, where there's allegations that individuals are being terminated because they were critical of the president, or one case I have to mention that was reported in the media, and this is a individual, by all accounts, had a stellar career at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Her name is Michelle Beckwith, and she became the acting U.S. Attorney in Sacramento. All she did was notify someone in the administration that was leading the immigration efforts that there was an existing court order, and she wanted to make sure there was compliance with that court order as it relates to individuals engaged in rounding up people, and she wanted to make sure that it was constitutional. Just by doing that act, apparently she, according to press reports, she caught the ire of a White House influencer. And that individual, forwarded her name, and next thing she knows, she was out of the job. And not only, Mrs. Beckwith, then you have the case of Michael Benary. He is at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia. That's one of the most important U.S. Attorney's offices, and this individual headed up the National Security Unit. It's so important because the CIA is based in that particular district. This individual had, experience, prosecuting some of the toughest terrorism cases. In fact, he has one that's scheduled for trial where, 10 Americans were killed and 170 Afghans were killed. And, he basically, again, got in the crosshairs of an influencer, and they alleged that he was involved in being resistant to the prosecution of former FBI Director Comey, and then he gets walked out of the office. And then you have other people as well that have similar, stories. So this is just very, very dangerous, and it's something that we really need to make, our politicians aware of. It's something that we need to complain about, because this is a direct impact on all of us, Nathaniel.
That's terrible, but it gets worse, Attorney Prime. Attorney Banks, I hope you have your ID in Chicago, because I see they're raiding folks down there. What's going on in your great city of Chicago?
Absolutely, unfortunately, and there have been several press conferences this week led by Governor Pritzker, where we're finding in broad daylight last Sunday, a beautiful day in Chicago, we're finding ICE descending, on our downtown area, where the Grant Park is located and where the Beam is located. And actually, they are sending upon people and tourists that are enjoying a Sunday afternoon and apprehended, for example, and this is one of many incidents that occurred, a family and made their young daughter translate while they were taking, this family into custody. And so we have, this unwarranted occupation by ICE and military troops here in Chicago. And these actions by ICE and the FBI are putting our citizens in harm's way and putting them actually in danger, and is not tied in any way to making Chicago more safe. But the goal is to provoke this conflict, to create chaos. Last Sunday, they descended and targeted street vendors and construction workers, and these actions have nothing to do with making the city safe. It's intended to strike fear in residents. I also received a saw a statistic this week that 90% of detention centers are run by Trump supporters, and they're calling this a gold rush, and that our taxpayer dollars are being used to establish these ICE private detentions. And also, it was reported that these detention centers are feeding detainees Subway kids meals. So this is a horrible situation here in Chicago. The Broadview community was devastated this week when, during the middle of the night, with drones and helicopters overhead, ICE descended into an apartment complex, dragging out families and children, some of the children naked, zip-tied, separated from their parents. And we know these things because citizens have been trained and instructed to, as much as they can, record and video these things that are happening in their community. So it's just been devastating.
Well, this is a sad day, but there's something. I was looking at the report. There is currently 350 pending tort claims nationwide against ICE. The total amount that they're seeking in damages on these claims is a whopping, for excessive force, right? And these are under the Civil Rights Code, but the total amount they're seeking is $47 billion, billions as in B. And
I was
so,
going to add, okay, absolutely.
and so what's going to happen? We had a weird thing that people need to keep this in a historical context. During January 6th, there was one of the person involved in the riot that was shot and killed as they were breaking into the Capitol in an area by an agent. And the family sued. And when the Trump came in office, they settled that case for $5 million. It was a very tragic situation, but $5 million for a person who's aggressively threatening law enforcement, it was the first time I'd seen that. So what's likely to happen is that these claims that are proceeding through for this misconduct, I'm thinking it's likely that in 2029 that these cases get settled favorably for most of these plaintiffs, because the conduct that you describe, I think, is an excessive use of force. And the thing that is sacrosanct about this, it sounds like we at All American now are required to keep an ID on us. You know, think about that. They're indiscriminately apprehending people, and how do they know the race or ethnicity of some of these folks? So I'm thinking that there's going to be mistakes made. I'm thinking that there's going to be a lot of Americans that are subject to this abuse of power. Counselors?
Absolutely. And we saw this in Chicago last week, where many U.S. citizens were detained for hours. People are stopped for, frankly, as Governor Pritzker stated, they're stopped for not being white. And so I agree with you that many of these illegal actions will result in the payment of damages as they make their way through the system. All last week, I'm looking at videos of citizens being thrown to the ground and just harshly thrown to the ground. And as one citizen said, as if they were nothing, and that Black citizens were placed in, one vehicle, and others were placed in a different vehicle, Hispanic citizens. And so I was in a store yesterday, and it's interesting, in the county that I live in, um, on a Saturday afternoon in a store that I was in here in Lake County. There was a diversity of people just shopping and, as if there's no concern here in Lake County. And I happened to ask a woman that was at the cash register, working the cash register, and I said, "Are you concerned? Do you have your papers?" You know what I'm saying? And she said that she did. And I just made some comments that are very, very true. It's like, the people need to come together because, each of us must do our part to resist what is happening currently. It can be stopped, but only if the people stop it, and each of us must do our part.
Yeah. Well, Marlon, here's what I don't understand in terms of what appears to me to be a clear abuse of power that will ultimately probably lead to the impeachment of this president. The Trump administration sent out letters, according to the news article, to 9 universities demanding that the school pledge their support for President Donald Trump's political agenda if they want to keep their federal funding. It was the New York Times report that it was a 10-page compact. Now, it requires the schools to freeze tuition for 5 years, restrict enrollment for international students, and adhere to definition of gender approved by the administration. Schools would also be required to prohibit the implementation of any policy that would punish, belittle, or even spark violence against conservative ideas. Now, this letter was sent to these universities: Dartmouth, Brown, MIT, Southern Cal, University of Arizona, University of Virginia, University of Pennsylvania, University of Texas, and Vanderbilt. So my concern is that these universities already had a substantial decline in enrollment of Black applicants. And do they want to have these universities open only to a certain demographic of students?
I think those are very real questions. I mean, if you really look at a lot of our universities across the country, and if you look at, picture books for the admitting class or the existing student body, there's a line of demarcation after the civil rights period in the 1960s. Prior to that time, you saw very few African Americans at many of our colleges and universities. And then there was an active effort to, increase those numbers. So there is a fear that we'll go back to that. Now, one of the other things that really kind of stokes that fear is that in that memo that was sent out, they also requested that the universities adhere to using the SAT and ACT as it relates to their admission standards. Now, that may seem benign to a lot of your listeners, but it has a disparate impact on African Americans because a lot of times, we do not have the benefit of taking prep courses for ACT, SAT. And then, in some, districts where a number of African Americans are going to high school, they don't have the advanced classes. Now, they eventually will catch up. But it certainly puts many of us at a disadvantage. So you saw a number of schools looking at other factors, extracurricular, issues that they may have overcome in their life, activities they were involved with, service. And so now they're just focusing this on the ACT and the SAT, so it's going to have a disparate impact. Now, the other issue that I think is really deeply troubling goes to the issue of the speech on campus. There is also in that edict that these universities, if they sign this pact, would prohibit university employees and professors from speaking publicly on issues unless they're directly related to that university, which is problematic because, we need more people that have expertise in issues, explaining issues to the public. And the final thing that I'm, very concerned about is the last statement that you had mentioned about, this amorphous concept that if this is something that could encourage violence against conservatives. I mean, it's so amorphous, it could really really mean anything. It could be, teaching African American history or teaching about the Middle Passage or colonialism. It's clear in the case law that the government cannot prefer one speech over another, and that seems to kind of be violating that central principle. And the other thing that I think is problematic, if you're capping international enrollment, this is going to have an impact on tuition because our international students, many of them pay double what in-state students pay. So it's going to have a big impact on the bottom line. And then students at our universities around the country, they learn from individuals that may be living overseas, whether it be China or Canada or Africa. And so to limit that enrollment is certainly going to limit the experience that many of our students are able to obtain at these universities. So it's very, very, very problematic in my view. And, your listeners should take a look at the Washington Post editorial today, which indicates that this is an agreement that the universities, no university in their right mind, should agree to. And so I certainly agree with that sentiment from the Washington Post.
And before we go to Attorney Banks, let's get one caller. Caller, you have a question or comment for us today?
Yeah, Fred Cox here. Mr. Lee, Attorney Primes, I'm just concerned about the way the Supreme Court is setting up itself. I thought that the Chief Justice was a constitutionalist, and it seems like everything that the administration currently is doing is against the Constitution. So could somebody provide some insight as to why you think the Chief Justice is allowing these things to, I guess, basically erode our constitutional rights? And I'll hang up and listen to it online.
Wow. I can't, I'm not appeared for Supreme Court. What do you think about that, Attorney Banks or Primes?
Well, I think they're absolutely right. There's, you can look no further than the dissents of Ketanji Brown Jackson and also the dissents of Sotomayor, Justice Sotomayor and Kagan. They are basically, giving us a roadmap of saying that, hey, precedent is not being followed. And your audience should know that one of the fundamental principles of our legal system is what's known as the concept of stare decisis. And that means that you follow the rulings of prior cases. And, what's interesting, this past week, Justice Clarence Thomas spoke at a university and basically says that, hey, precedent's not something that, is deeply compelling in so many words to him. So they're just going to basically just make it up as we go along. So that's certainly problematic. And it's also problematic if you look at Ketanji Brown Jackson's, one of her recent dissents. And she went so far as to say that the court is playing, in her terms, Calvin ball because, they're basically results oriented and, really skewed towards the administration as opposed to following precedent and the rule of law. So these are people that have a front row seat and that are raising alarm bells about the inconsistency. The final thing that I'll say that I think that your listeners should really pay close attention to is the powerful dissent of Justice Sotomayor. And she also, spoke publicly on The View and a number of other places. And she talked about the hypocrisy in that the Supreme Court, through its emergency or shadow docket, allowed there to be probable cause under the Fourth Amendment. And the Fourth Amendment indicates that you have to have a particularized suspicion. And the Supreme Court allowed ICE to, accost and ask questions just based upon, the fact that someone speaks Spanish or they may be in a, low-level job or their race. And I think Justice Sotomayor was correct in that that's problematic and that's inconsistent with prior Supreme Court precedent. And then it really kind of, if you juxtapose that to the recent decision in affirmative action where they said, hey, there's going to be strict scrutiny anytime there's race, even if it's to benefit African Americans. And then on top of it, and then you juxtapose that to this recent decision where they're saying, hey, Katie bars the door, anything goes. You can ask someone for their papers or immigration status based upon race. It's just inconsistent. So I think your caller, raises some legitimate concerns that are being raised by members of the Supreme Court and many pundits around the country.
Well, I wonder how it's going to affect Attorney Banks City, Chicago, with these raids and stuff. I suspect that eventually we're going to see some litigations that's going to be pursued by individuals whose rights are adversely affected.
Absolutely.
Has there been any lawsuits filed yet in Chicago for these raids?
Not yet, but our Attorney General has filed numerous lawsuits against the administration. And as a result of last week, I am sure that there will be litigation filed, if it has not yet already, by Kwame Raoul. And thank you, Marlon, for your eloquent comments regarding the justices that are speaking out in their dissents regarding what's happening in our nation, as we're seeing the outright erosion of and illegal actions with respect to fundamental right of freedom of speech in so many ways. And essentially, the Supreme Court has given this president the power to do, whatever he wants. And you remember the case holding that when in office and engaged in, quote, official acts, that this president can essentially do whatever he wants. I want to go back to these 9 universities that received this document called the, quote, Compact for Academic Excellence in Higher Education. And my sister went to Dartmouth College, which was one of the universities that received this 10-page proposed agreement last week. And as Harvard pushed back and a federal judge has overturned those cuts to funding, you'll recall the billions of dollars in federal money for Harvard, Columbia, and other universities that were accused of, quote, liberal bias. A federal judge in September held that the government had overstepped its bounds. So I am hoping that these universities will wholeheartedly reject this proposal, although leaders of the Texas system, which I'm not surprised about, the Austin campus, said they were honored to be chosen to be part of the compact and its potential funding advantages. And so they said they welcome the head of their board of regents stated that they welcome the new opportunity presented to us, and we look forward to working with the Trump administration on it. This is outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous, and we need these universities to reject this proposal.
Hey, let's go to Emotech. You have a question or comment for us today, sir?
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Attorney Banks Prime, Attorney Lee. Guess the hits just keep coming. First, I want to if you guys heard about a case or followed the case, want to pour out libations and to the family of, I think his name was Kyron Lacey. He was a wide receiver from LSU, falsely accused of vehicular homicide back in April. Prosecutor brought charges against him down in Louisiana. Day before his grand jury, he committed suicide. Lawyer, they had this evidence, I guess, for a while and sat on it. ESPN, everybody besmirched this kid's name. Found out, now we get the video out. Yesterday, lawyer put the video out. He was approximately about 75 yards behind the accident. You can see it clear on video. The man that was killed was hit by someone else. Kyron Lacey 75 yards behind in a green Charger. He comes, drives around accident, and then keep on going. So we have an unjust system here. We're under siege. And we can see from Chicago, Attorney Banks, distraught. Black Hawk helicopters. I'm a veteran of the United States Air Force. It cost about $500,000 to just get a Black Hawk off the ground. That's not counting the personnel, counting the logistics of where you're going. That's just to get the chopper off the ground. 300 ICE agents. You figure you probably had to have, I think Black Hawk holds what, Nate, about 40 people, 30 maybe 40 people. So you're looking at 10, 12, maybe Black Hawks. Who's paying for all this? Trump doesn't care. He's spending money like a boatload. Just shot another boat from Venezuela in the ocean, in the national waters, that no sign of doing anything. That costs money. It's ridiculous. We're under siege. We have no checks and balances. 6-3 decision the other day just took 300,000 temporary citizen status away from Venezuelans. In another 6-3 decision, Justice Ketanji Jackson just really wrote a scathing decision. I'm really proud of the liberal justice. They're trying. They're doing what they can. It's the public. It's the people. Now, Tucker Carlson, who I can't stand, but a Buddhist saying said that a clock is stopped is right twice a day. Tucker Carlson, when the stuff went down with Jimmy Kimmel, said freedom of speech is sanctimount and it should not be attacked. And in any of our rights, if the government tries to take them, then civil disorder is warranted and is appropriate. And I think at this point now, we're probably going to have to use some civil disorder along with some economic violence, because ABC still hasn't recovered from Jimmy Kimmel. They're still bleeding. People are not running back. They're not getting their subscriptions back. We got to use the economic arms too against these companies that have backed Trump and others who continually fund the GOP reelection campaign. How do we get our people to understand that this economic fight, we may not be able to all participate in civil disorder, but with economic disorder, we can definitely do that. What do we do? Attorney Banks, I'd like to hear from you, really, because women, you all give us a really fresh idea a lot of times. What can we do to get our people to understand there's nothing wrong with not spending the money for a greater good and to pull back on this money? That's the way we can hurt them really bad. King said it way back then. He said voting was one part of it. Protesting was another. He said, but economic boycotts was the third leg. And it seems like we just don't want to do it, except for the people or the groups that helped out Jimmy Kimmel. How do we get black folks to see, don't buy from the people who are helping this administration? And thank you for taking my call.
I agree with everything that you said wholeheartedly, caller. We have trillion-dollar spending power, and we should understand that power and exercise that power. And as you know, the Montgomery boycott, it went on for over a year, right? And so we've got to implement that type of fortitude as we are leveraging our economic power. The boycott against Target is working, right? When you look at the decline in their profits over the last year. And many are calling for, and I would also promote and encourage that over the Christmas holidays, when many businesses, that is the time of year where they achieve their greatest profits, that we don't buy anything that is not black for Christmas, that we make gifts. We probably don't need any more gifts. Our children probably don't. And that we exercise our substantial economic power during the Christmas holidays and not support these businesses that are not aligned with our community interests. What do you think, Attorney Lee?
Well, historically speaking, in order to deal with racial issues here in Indianapolis, back in the 80s, Carl Rafford was the president of the NAACP and I was a vice president. And we saw a great disparity in hiring. Now, this is very important. One of the economic engines, of course, is utility companies. and your banks and things like that. So we developed a strategic plan by getting them to sign what's called a fair share agreement, where they would guarantee they would hire so many African Americans, managers and different positions, and more importantly, also donate money to Black charities. And that's important, see, because you have to do with the nonprofit aspects of the community because they provide so many beneficial services to our community. And also, they help to reduce crime in our community. So you have to make sure that the nonprofits are taken care of. So this boycott of Target, the only thing I was disappointed in is that they paid money, the 300,000 to, I think, was it the National Baptist Convention or something. And I thought that was a fatal mistake because the Pastor Brian had apparently had negotiated $1 billion deal and they sold out for 300,000, not realizing that the corporation had agreed to do certain things and they broke their promise. And I think that since they announced that boycott, I've not been back into Target since. I was headed that way one day, and then I got to the store and said, "What the hell am I doing? I forgot about the boycott." Turned around and left. And so I've not bought or visited a single Target since they started this. And I used to spend a substantial amount. Like one of the things we used to do for our adoptive family, we would buy thousands of dollars of toys and stuff at Target. Never happened again. But I think what Target is missing out on, I may not ever go back to Target, even if they agree to it, because I'm done with them. I'm so done with it. But I think that we need to target more than Target. I think that we need, as a nation, I think we need to start fighting back by targeting other corporations. I mean, we're important. Black folks are important in the gross domestic product. Like for example, you take the Atlanta metro area, their GDP is greater than about 4 or 5 southern states, just in that one area. So diversity is important. And I think that they're not appreciating that. But they will appreciate it if we stop spending our money in their venues. And so I think that we need to be more aggressive in this field. And particularly now, when they're doing all-out assault on what they consider DEI, and we saw an example of DEI, the idiot over the military. I think they call them dumb, ignorant, or something. And so, in retrospect, we have to band together now and start targeting these corporations.
Absolutely. And on a future call, there is a list that I'm sure you've seen, Attorney Primes and Lee, of those corporations that are supportive of diversity, equity, and inclusion and full-throated about it because, again, diversity, equity, and inclusion was never intended for unqualified people to gain access to federal contracts or to corporate jobs. It was for, and still is intended for individuals who are qualified. And now I'm speaking about affirmative action as opposed to as to specifically diversity, equity, inclusion. I was particularly impressed by the e.l.f. Beauty CEO who came on one of the shows this week, and he was very clear-throated in stating that DEI drives business, and his company has had 26 quarters of profit, and just released a press release that stated that they have 256% better performance, and that diversity is the key to that financial success. And so the commentator of the show asked whether, he, felt any concern or risk by coming on to, the show to say that. But that's exactly what we need. We need people to speak truth to power. And again, the e.l.f. Beauty CEO was very clear that diversity is not just the right thing to do, which it very much is, but it is a specific and formidable driver of their business success.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think, many of your listeners, have indicated, hey, what can we do positively to deal with
Hmm.
some of the issues that we're confronting? And one of the things that you can do is really be deliberative in terms of where your money is going. So one of the things that I would encourage your listeners around the country is that most local communities publish Black pages, which is a listing of Black business owners, whether it be attorneys, doctors, accountants. Um, be intentional in terms of where your money's going. Also, look at the historically Black colleges, college tours. If you have money to set up a scholarship, consider, doing it at those institutions. We have Black banks and credit unions across the country. If you're getting a car loan, you don't have to get the car loan at Ford Motor Credit or Chrysler Motor or whatever company. You can get it financed by an African American bank and have that money rotate in our communities. So I think, during this period of time, we really have to be intentional. I think Attorney Banks is absolutely right that, we need to encourage and support these entities that are coming forward at risk of, a lawsuit by the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division and saying they're going to support, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we should, be intentional in supporting those particular businesses. And at the same time, making sure that we're keeping the money in our communities.
Caller, you have a comment for us?
Yes, this is Guy calling, and
Hi, guys.
good morning to the participants. Um, I had a particular question for Attorney Banks. Just wondered what is community organizations in the Chicago area under the threat from the National Guard being deployed in Chicago. I'm particularly interested in, like, say, some of the gang organizations or some of the uh, Nation of Islam, those kind of organizations in response that you can pick up.
I don't know if I heard the entirety of your question, Guy, but organizations and entities across the Chicago area are in lockstep in resisting the types of militarism that has been unleashed on the streets of Chicago, from religious groups to civic organizations, including our NAACP, our Urban League, to, of course, our public officials. Everyone is shoulder to shoulder in opposition to this seizure of our city streets in Chicago. I hope that answers your question. I didn't hear it all, but I think that was the gist of it. And what we have to remember, callers and listening audience, is that fear is the tool of a tyrant, and that this is an old playbook. It is not new. And so what happens first? You demonize the other party, right? You say, throw them in jail. They should be subject to a firing squad. You describe them in ways that are dehumanizing. And then you stack the courts. We see that through our discussion today relative to this 6-3 majority. And that's why, again, voting matters, right? Then what do? You demonize the press. And we're seeing these actions, which are an attempt to consolidate power and to stoke fear in our citizens. But the way this story ends depends on how the people respond.
Well, thanks for your answer. Have you noticed, supposedly the National Guard has been deployed because of the crime and violence in Chicago? So, like, Chicago is is known particularly on the South Side for various gangs that are organized. And I just wondered, has there been any notice of crackdowns on any of these gangs or organizations?
Well, first, the National Guard has not yet been deployed. It's been threatened and potentially may happen. I think the governor stated that there's been talks of maybe like 100 National Guard men being deployed at some point, but that hasn't happened yet. And so there have been some criminals that have been apprehended in these raids, but predominantly the residents who are just working people going about their business of going to school and church have been caught up in that fray. And you don't hear a lot about, the specific gang members that you're referencing, Guy, which of course the governor and everyone else in the city of Chicago are 100% supportive of being eradicated from our communities.
Very good.
Thank you, Guy.
Okay, one of the texts that we received from Renee is about the Jim Comey case, about the charges filed against the FBI director. But let me give people a quick overview of what I see has occurred. During the presidency election between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, after there was a story that talked about Planet Hollywood, in which the president was bragging about how he grabbed women by the private parts. And so when that bombshell hit, the poll number for Donald Trump dropped dramatically. And he got down, as far as I recall, internal polls about 11 points. So less than a month before the election, people started voting. Hillary Clinton is cruising to victory. Out of nowhere, Jim Comey, who was a Republican, starts a press conference, even though it was in the Obama administration. And in the press conference, he suggested that he was investigating criminal complaint potentially against Hillary Clinton. He launched a criminal investigation, which of course was against department policies. And so in 48 hours, Hillary Clinton poll number went from 11 up to 2 down in 48 hours. And the mantra in the Republican Party at their rallies became lock her up, lock her up. So from that standpoint, I was never a fan of Jim Comey because I thought that he himself was probably the person most responsible for the drop in poll and ultimately the loss at the poll in November, because he came back to correct that by saying that they weren't doing an investigation. But at that point, the damage was done and she never regained her swagger and lost to Donald Trump, and he became the president.
Right.
And so I have a problem. So when they started this process, Renee, it was suspect. I mean, Marla can tell you, the federal government, when they launch these investigations and indictment, it's a very, very expensive piece of litigation, very expensive to defend yourself against a federal criminal lawsuit. I suspect that Sean Diddy Combs, with all the lawyers he got, probably spent on the low end about $30 million or so on his defense in that criminal case. So the point I'm making is that so they charged him, and it was fickle. I don't know. I've never been a prosecutor, but Marlon, I thought that grand jury process, it was just screw it. I've never seen anything like it before.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. In fact, the federal magistrate had some significant questions. Now, your audience should remember that the President of the United States appointed a U.S. attorney who is experienced and fairly well respected in that office, and he basically indicated there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute James Comey. And then following that, you had a detailed memo that was circulated by assistant U.S. attorneys in that office that also reinforced there wasn't enough evidence. So then what the president did is he went ahead and hired someone who had no experience whatsoever in prosecution, and she alone went to the grand jury and got an indictment. Now that is called into question because the federal magistrate said, wait a minute, I have two papers. I have one paper indicating that there is not an indictment at all, and then one paper indicating that there is an indictment. So which one is it? And so this new U.S. attorney had some problems answering those questions. And there's some question about whether she's properly appointed. So there may be some litigation in that regard. But the final thing that I think your audience should be aware of is that in the Abrillo case that you remember, this is the individual that was deported to El Salvador. And so it got a lot of national attention. And the judge that's litigating that case, that's presiding over that case, allowed Abreu's team to pursue a vindictive prosecution claim and get discovery. That's very unusual. And many people are saying that that same tactic is probably going to be used in the Comey litigation, or his team is going to file a similar action. Because there's a question about whether or not this is a vindictive prosecution or whether it's meritorious. So we really have to look at how this case progressed.
Well, but one of the things I think is critical is that these appointment, I think, of these U.S. attorneys is a temporary appointment. It isn't like expires after 120 days. Is that right?
Well, the temporary appointment does. And so you can have a temporary appointment by the federal judges within that federal judicial district, and then you can have a temporary appointment, by the Department of Justice. But there's detailed procedures that have to be followed, and apparently there's an allegation that those weren't followed in this case. So we'll have to see how this progresses. But I think we all should be rightly concerned.
Well, I'm going to be monitoring this, looking at it, but I was thinking that based on what you said and the headlines I've read, if the 120-day time expires and they try to reappoint people a second time by giving them another position, I wonder what happens since nobody in the office wanted to sign the indictment in the first place. I wonder whether or not once their term of office expires in 4 months, or less than 4 months now, whether or not that case just kind of fall apart. It'd be interesting to see how that developed, whether or not he'll be able to get a second person to do the same thing that she did,
Right. Well, the problem is statute limit. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But my other problem is this, is that most people don't realize the legal community is probably the most regulated profession of all. And when you see attorneys engage in misconduct, it's seemingly they're getting away with it, but they don't. Because what happens is they go before the bar and they get suspended, they lose their license. And so I suspect at some point in time, there's going to be some accountability for this lawyer for doing what she did. I will be surprised if it does not occur.
I was really concerned about the attorney that you described, Marlon, Michael Bennery, who, as he was fired, he take a letter on the door outside his office, accusing the Justice Department of being more concerned with going after President Trump's perceived enemies than protecting the nation's security. And he is very concerned that the politicization of the Justice Department jeopardizes our national security and makes Americans more safe. And you can believe that, unfortunately, and I'm very scared to hear this, that, nation states, criminal organizations, and terrorist organizations, they're all observing what's happening here in this nation. And those Homeland Security experts had really been the guardrails in protecting us in terms of our national security. And so again, the political leadership of the DOJ is really threatening our security and making us less safe. And so that's something too that your listeners should be aware of.
Wow. Well, listen, we come to the end of our show this week, and I'm sorry I couldn't get to all the callers today. And I thank our superstar panel, and we got to continue this discussion next week because I'm sure there will be legal issues today that's going to be just as compelling as we're dealing with today. So thank you all for listening in, and thank you, Marlon and Vanita, and all our callers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Attorney Lee,
Thank
for
you.
hosting us.